In a previous video, has corporate media lost its way in recent years? We examined a trend of rising distrust of mass media by Americans. When did this distrust begin? Let's look at the Gallup polls from 1972 to 2020 on America's trust in mass media. From two figures below, one can clearly see that after the late 1960s and early 1970s, people no longer trust mass media the way they used to. It went from bad to worse. Then the next question would naturally be, what caused the rising distrust? To examine the causes, we will look back on events which took place 60 to 70 years ago, not only in the United States, but also around the world. In the Eastern world, a major event was the formation of the so-called Communist Camp led by the Soviet Union after World War II, which was an association of communist countries during the mid-20th century. In 1949, the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, took over mainland China, which made the Communist Camp unprecedentedly strong. It almost occupied 1/3 of the world geographically, as well as in terms of world population. In mainland China, the CCP initiated many movements, one after another, to strengthen their totalitarian regime by brutally killing elite people from all walks of life, on one hand, and on the other hand, to brainwash and control people's minds by eradicating all traditional and religious beliefs, effectively destroying 5,000 years of Chinese traditional culture and indoctrinating all Chinese people with communist ideology and party culture, from kindergarten students all the way to senior citizens. In 1966, the infamous Great Cultural Revolution began, which, in the CCP's own words, was an unprecedented disaster. That was when the younger generation, after the CCP took over, had grown up. The CCP then used them to destroy Chinese culture. During the Cultural Revolution, many millions of Chinese people were killed, and no religious belief survived except communism itself. Chinese traditions of being truthful, kind, and tolerant were replaced by dishonesty, hatred, and constant struggle. At the same time, there were many other anti-culture movements which happened in Europe, America, and Asia. In what was known as the Summer of Love in 1967, thousands of self-proclaimed hippies gathered in San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury Park and Golden Gate Park for several days, expressing their resistance to society with bizarre behavior. This included drug use, nudity, unusual sing-alongs, and rock and roll music. In the summer of 1969, more than 400,000 people gathered in the same way at the Woodstock Festival, held near New York City. Here, people indulged in debauchery while shouting about love, freedom, and peace. In France, the events of May 1968 shook the world. It began with angry students rebelling against traditional morality and culture. They demanded for the right to sexual activity in student dorms as the initial protests. The students' rebellion then found support among both the socialist and communist parties in France, and finally had tens of millions of French citizens involved in the movement. There's a saying that in the late 1960s, there were two centers for the revolution. One was Beijing, the other was Paris. At the time, Chinese students marched with slogans and banners in support of the French student rebels, while in Paris, the Western Red Guards wore green military caps and uniforms with red armbands in support of the Maoists in China. They held up huge portraits of Mao Zedong in their parades, and the three M's, Marx, Mao, and Marcuse, became their ideological mainstay. Similar things happened in other countries in South America and Asia. Who coordinated such movements internationally at almost the same time with similar goals? What were the purposes of these movements? These will be discussed in future videos. Nonetheless, in this world, the nations have many different cultures. However, they share a strikingly similar set of core values. All ethnic groups in the East and West attach importance to the virtues of honesty, kindness, justice, selflessness, and the like, virtues that every nation has paid tribute to and taught to their descendants through the classical works. Common among all groups is the paying homage to the divine and adhering to divine law, because of the shared belief that the divine handed down the culture and code of conduct that humankind should possess and embody. When people no longer respect their traditional culture and no longer believe in divinity and good conduct, then human morality will deteriorate rapidly. The result has manifested in every sector of our society: the media, politicians, and even some law enforcement personnel being dishonest and untrustworthy. This may explain why people have begun to distrust the media since the 1970s. We will stop here, and will further reveal the forces behind the worldwide anti-culture movements and their ultimate goals in other videos in this series.